Hello everyone, welcome to round 13 of Grand Prix Montreal. Rich Hagan and Jacob Van Lunen in the commentary box with you. Black-green aggro for McLaren, mono-black zombies, and a Dread Wanderer kicking us off for Ethan Gaieski. Both these players only a win away from the top 8 by our calculation on the math. This tournament is small enough that once you hit the 12th win, you can then shake hands with someone, as we see Metallic Mimic coming down for Ethan, so he's underway on turn 1 and 2. McLaren is going to reach out with Dissenter's Deliverance to destroy an artifact on turn 2. So back we go to Gaieski. The action coming thick and fast early. JVL.
Yeah, now the thing that's interesting here with this matchup is black-green aggro. This is a deck that, you know, was kind of pushed out by Zombies at the Pro Tour. Zombies is so good against these other aggressive decks. And this weekend, you know, we've seen tons of people hedging against Zombies. We've seen lots of Sweltering Suns, lots of Chandra the Flamecallers. And as a result, Mono Black Zombies hasn't been quite as successful as it was last weekend. Ethan has either dodged or played around those cards effectively enough to be at an 11-1 record at this stage of the tournament, which is really impressive.
Ricky Spanish asks, has Shaun's deck had a different name every time it's been on camera? Not yet, but thanks for the idea. Coming in round 13, Shaun McLaren's Big Fat Black-Green Aggro. Something like that.
Yeah, we saw Shaun McLaren do crazy things with Winding Constrictor yesterday. At certain times, he would slow roll a pair of Winding Constrictors in his hand, and then he would cast both of them on the same turn with a Nissa in play, and then minus the Nissa, and essentially give a permanent overrun to his entire team.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Here, he's getting pretty run over.
Yes, there are some things going on there. We've got Crypt Breaker, we've got Dread Wanderer, which came back, a replacement Metallic Mimic. This one, since we last saw it, Metallic Mimic's been to Japan, I suspect. I learned some Japanese there. But there you see the English language version on your screen. Could it possibly have chosen Zombie?
I would assume it would. There are very, very few times that you would not choose Zombie in this deck.
Let's just guess yes. As we see some things getting shaped up here, the +1/+1 counter on. This is a brutal beating, although Ethan is busy card drawing off the Crypt Breaker.
Yeah, and there's an interesting push and pull when you're playing the Zombie deck. Do I draw cards in my Crypt Breaker, or do I start getting aggressive and taking down my opponent's life total? And a lot of that is dependent on what you have in your hand and what you expect your opponent to be able to have. If you have a removal spell already at the ready, then a lot of the time it's correct to just continue drawing cards, because even if your opponent plays a threat to try to catch up, you can just punish them and then continue going up and up the ladder.
Right, so Grimflayer has bitten the dust for McLaren, and courtesy of that fatal push. And now the replacement is a Tireless Tracker, and McLaren is doing fine in terms of having some clues. What he doesn't have, he actually still has a lot of life, but he doesn't necessarily have a lot of time. Ethan down to 2 cards. McLaren trying to put up a fight. The Dissenter's Deliverance was good news for him. That was probably the best play of the game so far for him.
And Shaun playing 4 copies of Dissenter's Deliverance in his main deck, and it's been working out really well for him this weekend. Every time we've seen him play, we've seen some people miss on Marvel spins, and then he's able to get that off the table. We've seen a lot of people run out the Marvel when they don't have the energy to activate it, and you know the reason they're doing that is because they're playing against black-green. They're more worried about the card being in their hand and getting removed by a card like Transgress the Mind than they are about him having Dissenter's Deliverance, especially in Game 1.
That Dissenter's Deliverance, by the way, does tell a really, really dark story. If you're unaware, the Dissenters on Armenket are basically entombed in sarcophagi with their living hands still on display, so that everyone can walk by and know that those are real people stuck inside there. And what you're seeing is the Deliverance, where they are removed from the sarcophagi. But, oh boy, that is just not a happy tale. It's not actually that happy a place, Armenket, it turns out.
No, it's probably the darkest world Magic's ever been to, I think.
Oh, wow. I'd not even... Okay, that's probably going to prompt some discussion. But meanwhile, we've got Crypt Breaker and Metallic Mimic and Dread Wanderer. Everything's piling in.
Yeah, and Shaun's just going to block here with the Tireless Tracker just to try to save himself some damage. But with what's in Shaun's deck, there's really no answer that he has now. This Liliana's Mastery, not only is it adding, 8 points of power to the board, but it's also pumping up the rest of his creatures. So in function there, that card added 12 points of power to the table.
So that's,
and 4 of it had haste.
Okay, so let's just check. That's actually vastly more efficient than Ulamog.
Yes, absolutely.
Like just 2.4 times as powerful.
Yes.
12 power for 5 mana as opposed to 10 power for 10 mana.
Yeah, you don't get to exile the permanents, which is, a bit of a drawback, but incredibly powerful card.
Well, that was game number 1, and because it went super fast, even though we've got the word aggro on the screen for Shaun McLaren, it will not come as a surprise to learn that game 1 went to Mono Black Zombies and Ethan Gaieski, who it looks like, in a field where Mono Black Zombies does not appear to be doing as well as the Pro Tour last week, when, of course, we saw multiple copies into the top 8, looks like Gaieski may be leading the Zombie Horde back to top 8 appearance. We'll be right back with more Magic after this. Hello everyone, welcome back to coverage of Grand Prix at Montreal. You're not seeing any magic here, and I can tell you, you couldn't see any magic there, or there, or there.
Everyone's shuffling.
Everybody's shuffling. And this is why we need to make those videos of Little Rich the Shuffling Clown, which some people in chat will already know about, and those who don't, well, let's just move on. But Shaun McLaren and Ethan Gaieski is where we're going to stay for game number 2, because hopefully it will not be too far away. Shaun McLaren, it is a cliche to refer to him as the lone wolf, but the simple truth is this is a man who goes, the person I trust most in playtesting is Shaun McLaren, and closely followed by Shaun McLaren.
Yeah, in an era of team Magic, Shaun McLaren has flown in the face of that and really had a ton of success just practicing by himself, sitting in front of a computer and playing games of Magic on the internet and coming to his own conclusions.
And being completely serious, which is not something I always do, but being completely serious, one thing that eliminates is where you have to correctly evaluate how you value everyone else's opinion and test result. I've tested for any number of events where I lose 9-1 both ways round in the matchup because the person I'm playing with is just a lot better than I am. So that's not proving anything about the actual decks. That's just showing they're better than me at Magic. McLaren doesn't have that issue. He can evaluate everything within his own frame set. He can remember everything for himself. There's no ego involved. He's just working for himself. There's a lot to recommend it if you're that good. And that's the hard bit.
And it's a combination of, being that good and also, it's the way people learn and the way people get better. Some people work better as individuals. Some people work better in team settings.
And to be fair, that some of the chat are saying, well, of course, there is his brother now, which wasn't always the case. Dean McLaren, who's putting up some decent finishes at GPs, I'm pretty sure that they do actually exchange thoughts. But nonetheless, it is very much Shaun on Magic Online. As we kick off with a Winding Constrictor, which met with a Grasp of Darkness.
Yeah, now it's interesting here in this post-boarded game. Shaun, the 2 cards that matter most in his sideboard here are 2 copies of Yahenni's Expertise.
Okay, so that's the -3/-3 to everything?
Yes, and you get to play a card that costs 3 or less from your hand without paying its casting cost.
Right. Is -3/-3 enough?
Against zombies, usually.
Okay.
It's enough if they have 1 Lord.
Yeah.
Or 1 Liliana's Mastery.
Right.
If they have 2,
so Lord of the
gets out of
Accursed
range.
plus Liliana's Mastery.
Yeah, that essentially turns it off.
Cool.
It might still hit some things, but definitely a lot less impressive than could be otherwise. We see Ethan leading off with the Diregrab Colossus. When he doesn't have any zombies in his graveyard, he knows that the type of removal spells that Shaun plays, it doesn't really matter if that's 2/2, a 3/3, or a 4/4. It's going to die to those removal spells just the same.
Okay.
And if Shaun chooses to not use a removal spell to get that Colossus off the table right now, then he's going to be in a world of hurt, because then Ethan can start generating extra tokens off of it and overwhelm him, as we saw him do in the first game.
Now I see a Liliana, and now you see a Liliana too. Whether it is indeed the last hope is unclear.
Yeah, and one thing I like here is Shaun is, using the Liliana and the Walking Ballista to take care of that Diregraph Colossus before it can make tokens. And what's interesting there is that Ethan chose to take the 1 damage from the Walking Ballista attack, as opposed to just blocking, because he knows that Shaun is just going to finish it off with the Walking Ballista afterward. So Shaun there able to sneak in extra damage where he otherwise would not have been able to. And every point of damage counts when you're playing at this stage of a tournament. Both these players are 11-1. They know that if they win this round, even if they lose the following round, they can still draw into the top 8 in the last round of the tournament.
Yeah.
Barring some unlucky pairings.
So McLaren working with 4 cards right now. And for 5 mana, Obnixilis Reignited. That's the special Obnixilis Planeswalker voice. Just
so very nice.
It's like I'll say, here's Liliana, there's a Gideon, there's Chandra Flamecaller, Obnixilis Reignited.
I love it. That's a really powerful card. Now Shaun's got 2 Planeswalkers on the battlefield, and Ethan has nothing. So, I mean, this helps. Liliana's Mastery's, 6 points of power.
Yep.
It's going to make all of the zombies that Ethan plays afterward more powerful. But with those 2 Planeswalkers on the other side of the board, he's going to be hard-pressed to catch up. It even looks like Shaun is able to play a 3rd Planeswalker to the battlefield this turn if he so desires.
Wow.
And the nice thing about playing Nissa here is that he'll play that 3rd Planeswalker, and then he'll also get plants, which can start chump blocking to protect these Planeswalkers. And, Ethan's going to have to do a lot of work to mull his way through all of these loyalty counters, and eventually one of these Planeswalkers is going to go ultimate.
Right, I mean, potentially a 3rd Planeswalker just planted onto the battlefield. Let's see if that's what happens. Land number 6. Oh, 1, 2, 3. Oh, okay. I'm going to reach out with a bit of never action. And there indeed is Nissa, Voice of Zendikar. The triple threat Planeswalkers. Wow.
And suddenly things looking very scary here for Ethan.
Come on now, chat. There's nothing more aggro than 3 Planeswalkers and a 0/1 on the battlefield. What are you talking about?
I mean, in Game 1, Shaun's deck is very aggressive. And, we've seen Mardu Vehicles decks do this in the past, where there's post-sideboard plans decide to board in a bunch of Planeswalkers. Because your opponent brings in these spot removal spells, they know, oh, I can't let a Constrictor go unchecked. I can't let, all these cards go unchecked. So they're going to bring in these spot removal spells to fight you. And then if you bring in a bunch of Planeswalkers, suddenly they have these really inefficient cards in their deck. And you can just play these cards that kind of act as extra players all by themselves.
So it used to be that transformational sideboards were very rare in Magic, and they were basically about a control deck that felt it needed to go under the unwinnable matchup with uncounterable things, and you'd bring in 13 creatures out of a sideboard, or essentially the other way around, where you were low to the ground, you couldn't get there, you were getting beaten by mid-range, so you just went full-on control, and you bring in board sweepers and counters and so on. It is such a different world where the transformational sideboard is, and now here's 8 planeswalkers spread across 3 different planeswalkers that come in. It just really changes the game, and it does make the sideboarding dance a lot more interesting. There's this whole other class of transformation that you can do.
Absolutely. I mean, in today's game of Magic, the planeswalkers in general do a good job of that, of allowing you to build your deck in such a way that you can use only a portion of your sideboard and have your deck play completely differently in, you know, the second or third game.
Frankie Rollins asks, I thought you could only have 1 planeswalker out at one time. You're on the right lines, Frankie. It's basically you can only have 1 of the same planeswalker at a time.
Yeah.
So the multiverse doesn't like Obnixilis Reignited meeting another Obnixilis Reignited.
Yes.
At that point, choose 1. And back you come. So that's... and the thing is, you're looking at Obnixilis Reignited there. See, it doesn't actually... It says Nixilis, so it isn't always clear, particularly to newer players, that you can't have another Obnixilis, but that is how that works. So now what Shaun can do, there are various tricks you can do where you activate one, so you could draw a card and lose a life here, up this Obnixilis Reignited, cast another one if you desperately wanted another card, for example. So that happens. You can do that, but you never have more than 1 on the battlefield. As soon as it sees the second one, it's like, get one of those out of here. So there you go.
Yeah, and you can't have multiple copies of the same type of planeswalker.
Right,
either.
so it's any Obnixilis, as Mammalman722 says. It's just any Obnixilis, any other Nissa. Nope, not happening.
You can't have a Nissa Vital Force or a Nissa Worldwaker alongside, you know, a Nissa Voice of Zendikar.
Right, so you can't have a Chandra Pyromaster alongside a Chandra Flamecaller.
Correct.
Which would explain why you don't see individual Planeswalker theme decks from casual players with, you know, like 4 copies of every version of Chandra running around.
Here we see a Verdurous Gearhulk. Now that's a card that has been really good at various stages of this standard format.
On this occasion,
or
done at
previous
its
standard formats.
Yeah, done at its simplest. Hi, I'm a 4/4. Kidding, I'm an 8/8.
Yeah, that's the thing about Verdurous Gearhulk that is so absurd that at its very worst, it's usually an 8/8 trample for 5. And that's a pretty good deal.
It turns out, in the secret world of chat watchers, there are entire decks full of Gideons and Chandras, just so you know. They're queuing up to out themselves. So... okay.
I guess they want to play a whole bunch of Gideons so that they can't lose when they have the new Gideon emblem in play.
There we go. All right. Meanwhile, back in round 13 of Grand Prix Montreal here, McLaren's 1-0 down with his black-green aggro, as it were. But to be fair, the last time we put that graphic up, we called it black-green Constrictor, and we're not seeing any of those either, except that one in the graveyard from very early in the game. It's black-green Walkers. Is what we're seeing here. Meanwhile, Ethan is mastering up plus Lord of the Accursed. It's like Lord, Lord, Lord. So those zombies are 5/5 right now.
Yeah, currently 5/5 zombies. So this Verdurous Gearhulk does a good job of, you know, gobbling one of them up. But, you know, Ethan could kill the Verdurous Gearhulk and allow his zombie to survive with a Grasp of Darkness here by turning that Verdurous Gearhulk into a 4/4, which isn't quite as big as this 5/5 zombie here.
Yeah. But Verdurous Gearhulk is still enormous. So Ethan trying to fight the fight.
And now Shaun getting to the point where, you know, he can ultimately Liliana the Last Hope, and once that happens, that's going to close the door really quickly on Ethan.
Right, and you said a good number of turns ago, 3 Planeswalkers, going to find it really hard to fight through those. Sooner or later, he's going to get to ultimate one of them.
Absolutely.
And here we are.
Somehow that's just how it goes. And there we go. Now, this is one of the cooler emblems I've seen. It's very flavorful, in addition to being unbelievably powerful. The zombie horde grows, and the more zombies you have, the more zombies you get.
Here is a winding constrictor. Oh, and a Kalitas. Oh, and a plant.
I think he's pumping.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, because the thing about this pump here is that now he's putting 2++1 counters on each of those creatures. So suddenly, even though Ethan just has these 5/5 zombies, this 5/6 Lord of the Accursed, it is, or rather, I'm sorry, this 4/5 Lord of the Accursed, those are not very impressive when compared to, the massive lifelinker that is Kalitas, Trader of Get, or a 4/5 Winding Constrictor and a 2/3 Plant.
Is there anything Ethan can do from here, realistically? As he draws Metallic Mimic, he's got Metallic Mimic.
Do not believe so.
Grasp of Darkness is there.
Now, even if he is somehow, which seems very unlikely, able to get through and kill either the Omnixilus or the Nissuace of Zendikar, there's too much pressure on the battlefield, and that Liliana emblem will eventually win the game just by itself against a mono-black zombies deck.
So, there we are. Black-green Planeswalker mid-range McLarenness makes it 1-1. I wonder if we can get the graphic change to actually say that. So it's 1-1.
Make it an acronym.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you have to be careful with those unless you've written them down and worked them out. You have to be very careful for suggesting that. The BG, yeah, you're probably good with the BG. It's when you put a vowel in between that things start going wrong. Meanwhile, let's head across town to another black-green. Is it aggro? Well, let's see. Tireless Tracker with 2 counters on and a clue for Anand Khare, who is currently 1-0 up against the devil in the room, apparently, Team of Marvel. This is Patrick Reynolds, who's also at 10-2, looking to set up a win and in next time around. He's got a Whirler Virtuoso and a Rogue Refiner. 5 energy for him. No sign of a Marvel. Looks like there's one that's gone away earlier in the game. Top of the screen. And we're about to see...
They may have been dispossessed, as a matter of fact.
Oh, okay. They may all be gone. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's not very good for a deck that calls itself Team of Marvel. Now
no,
it's just
definitely
Teamer.
Not. And that's one of the things that makes the Teamer deck so powerful, though, is that even when people, warp their deck to include these sideboard cards that kind of like completely turn off your plan A, the deck's still really powerful, just as like this mid-rangey kind of attacking deck. Here we see a Whirler Virtuoso and a Rogue Refiner. Those are fine cards on their own, even if you don't have Aetherworks Marvel in your deck. I was happily playing those in my Saheeli combo deck before it got banned.
And no need for energy for the Marvels that you can't have anymore, so there's a free flyer waiting in the wings.
And earlier today, we talked about how Eldrazi Sky Spawner is a really powerful card that doesn't see that much play. Whirler Virtuoso is just so good.
Yes.
Like, this is a card that, would likely see a decent amount of play, even if it weren't for Aetherworks Marvel, and even if we weren't trying to race up to that amount of energy.
Dissenter's Deliverance doesn't have a good target, or indeed any target, so gets cycled by Khare. How would you know you're fighting fantasy game books, Jake? So in Sorcery, Book 2, Khare, City Port of Traps. Every time I see the Anand Khare, I think Sorcery. Steve Jackson. Best game books ever.
He's actually a Jersey guy. It's my area.
Oh,
He's
Anand.
had quite a bit of success as of late.
Cool.
Yeah, I believe 1 or 2 Grand Prix top 8s in the last 2 months.
Here's Kalitas, Traitor of Get.
Kalitas is a very powerful card, especially when you combine it with inexpensive removal spells, because if you're able to play it on the same turn you use one of your removal spells, then you already gain some advantage off it by having the 2/2 zombie on the battlefield. And the other thing that's nice about it is that really Harness Lightning is the only card out of these Temur decks that can get it off the battlefield. So if they start using those cards more aggressively on your early creatures, which they're often forced to because you're playing cards like Whining Constrictor, then they're going to need something like a Confiscation Coup to get it off the table later.
Take care, Fox. See you soon. Enjoy uni. And hopefully you'll be back in time for the top 8 in a couple of hours' time. As we see Confiscation Coup say, I tell you what, that Collatus looks pretty good. I think I'll have it. Or, as we like to say, yoink.
And that's what we just talked about. We were trying to figure out how, Collatus could be dealt with by Patrick Reynolds, especially now that there are no Marvels left in his deck, and Confiscation Coup is the perfect kind of card to do that. I mean, control magic effects, effects that steal cards, these are really powerful in Magic because they're what we like to call 2-for-1s, where you're getting 2 cards for 1 card, but it's the most powerful kind of 2-for-1 because your opponent has already paid mana for a permanent, and now you're paying some amount of mana, and you're not only taking that permanent away from them, but you're adding that permanent to your side of the battlefield. So here, Anand Khare used 4 mana to play Collatus, and he also used a card for that. And then Patrick Reynolds is able to play just 5 mana, and he's able to deal with the 4 mana card that Anand Khare played, while also adding that same 4 mana, very powerful card to his side of the battlefield. Yoink.
There you go. See, maybe we can get that turned into a keyword. What we can get that turned into is a game 3. That is certain. So it's 1-1. Patrick Reynolds squares things up against Anand Khare. So we are going to head back, conveniently enough, for game number 3 in McLaren against Gaieski. I wonder if they had many mulligans there, because that took a while to get to this point. We weren't holding them, so let's just see if we can see how many cards McLaren's got there. He's got a full 7. Huh. Okay. They just shuffled slowly. Well, that's great because we get to show you game number 3. So let's get to it.
Plenty of time left in this match, too. This isn't necessarily a match that they're too worried about time being much of a factor.
Okay. So here we go with McLaren's first play. It's to traverse the Ulvenwald. No sign of delirium, unsurprisingly, at this stage of the game, but traverse still a perfectly reasonable Magic card without.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about Traverse, is that early in the game, when you know that you're going to need to hit your 2nd or 3rd land drop, you can kind of cycle it and guarantee yourself to get a land. Meanwhile, in the later stages of the game, it becomes a super powerful tutor effect. And because it's that tutor effect, you can then start using your sideboard more effectively and including one of specific cards in your sideboard that are really powerful in very specific situations. And then you bring in those one-ofs, and all you need is to traverse the Ulvenwald in your hand, and it can be any of those sideboard cards.
So the Scrap Heap Scrounger is going to meet Fatal Push from McLaren, so the board is clear, and that definitely advantaged Shaun McLaren based on what we saw in Game 2, which involved most of the center of the screen filling up not with creatures, but with Planeswalkers. Let's see if McLaren can do a similar thing in Game number 3 here. Well, on turn 3, as early as it could happen, here's Liliana the Last Hope.
And the Mono Black Zombies deck, it can only pressure Planeswalkers by attacking them with creatures that do not have haste. So as long as Shaun McLaren can kind of keep the board locked down for the coming turns and prevent the Liliana from dying to whatever might be attacking it, then we may see an ultimate again. And that's a really common way for the Mono Black Zombies deck to lose, is to a Planeswalker ultimate by the opponent.
Now, reminder for those of you just joining us, because these two players are both at 11 and 1, whilst we believe that the winner is essentially into the top 8, though they will need probably another point somewhere, there is basically, even for the loser at 11 and 2, they get to play next round to get to 12 and 2, and we believe that that is a place where, again, a handshake into the top 8 might be possible. And, indeed, the winner here, even if they were to go 12 and 1 and then lose their last 2, they would be in prime position amongst the 12 and 3s to make it into the top 8. We think we may see some 36s get across the finish line here.
And I like this play from Shaun. Instead of trying to advance a board state, Colossus is one of those cards you really want to get off the table the moment you see it. You don't want them to get additional value out of it. And not only is he doing that, but if Ethan decides to tap his mana and not return the Scrap Heap Scrounger to play this turn, then return can be used to create a chump blocker to protect the Liliana the Last Hope, while also removing that Scrap Heap Scrounger from Ethan's graveyard and taking a lot of the wind out of his aggressive cells.
Yeah, Ethan with 5 cards in hand. Now, 5 mana. Is this a Liliana's Mastery? No, it's a Kalitas for 4. So that will put pressure on Liliana if Shaun doesn't have an answer. But currently, Ethan playing catch-up each turn, and that looks like a Verdurous Gearhulk on the end here for Shaun McLaren, plus a land to get to the magic number of 5. For that, I'll tell you what might get in the way. Here's an 8/8 Trampler.
The thing is that there are a decent number of cards that kill Verdurous Gearhulk, and it may actually be advantageous for Shaun to play Tireless Tracker and make a clue, and then be able to sacrifice that clue to trade with the Kalitas. Instead, he's just using Traverse the Elven Wall.
Okay, option 3.
Yeah.
The way I generally prioritize lines of play is the first one I see, if I see a second one, and if there's time, see if there's a third. So my suggestion of Verdurous Gearhulk was not strategic, merely observational. As Zombie gets eaten by Fatal Push, and now Ethan does have the board clear to have a little swing at Liliana. And of course, there you see, Liliana gets knocked down a peg or two. Ethan lays land number 6.
That's one of the nice parts about Liliana is even if they do find a way to get through, oftentimes you've shrunk the creature they're getting through with.
Yeah.
So she's still kind of protecting herself in that way and kind of remaining static at that 5 loyalty number. Last time we saw the second half of Never to Return, exiling a Scrap Heap Scrounger while Ethan didn't have the 2 mana to exile a creature to return it. And that's great for Shaun because otherwise he'd have this recurring threat that just keeps coming back, and that can get really dangerous when your opponent already has a Kalitas and you're trying to protect it, a Liliana the Last Hope, so that you can eventually go ultimate.
Do you know the thing about recurring threats? They keep coming back.
Yeah, they do.
Do you know the thing about recurring threats? McLaren?
Don't make me walk away. Don't make me walk away.
Have we reached that part of the day already? I thought I'd get you all the way to the semis before that. We've got Verdurous Gearhulk, and before we even get the counters going anywhere near it, Grasp of Darkness, go away.
And that's a great situation for Ethan because not only does that get that 8/8 off the battlefield for just 2 mana, but then Ethan's also able to make a zombie, and now he's going to be attacking this Liliana the Last Hope for 3 on the following turn. And suddenly Shaun McLaren's plan A of ultimating Liliana the Last Hope is not looking like it's going to be realistic.
Ethan sends in Liliana down to 3. Ethan's making a good fist of this. A lot of people in chat were asking why Ethan kept his opening hand, which is a deck, mono black zombies, in theory, of go wide, make lots of zombies, and he was very light on creatures. I think someone said in chat he actually opened with no creatures in hand, so what was he keeping? But he seems to be doing kind of okay again.
And there's something to be said for the interaction, too. He knows his opponent's on a black-green Constrictor deck, and he knows they're going to be trading card for card a lot. So neither decks are going to mulligan particularly well in these post-boarded games. And in addition to not mulliganing well, his removal spells are very live and very good here. So
double Tireless Tracker. And again, the speed at which Ethan just identifies what needs killing and gets on and kills it. He is so fast at this. As we get a clue coming down from the 1 remaining tracker, Liliana will tick up, back up to 4. Kalitas gets small. But now, if Ethan could maybe dig out a Liliana's Mastery from somewhere, things would start to get interesting again.
And things could still go well for Shaun here also. One of the biggest problems for Shaun here is that the Kalitas has kind of gotten out of hand. Now that it has 6 toughness, a lot of the cards that he could have used previously to get it off the board don't work anymore. When it had first come down, he could even combo Yahenni's Expertise with Liliana's +1 ability. But now he's basically down to 2 copies of Never Return, which he has already used 1 of. And he may have sideboarded in 2 additional copies, but I'm not sure that's even the case here.
hello. How unfair is this?
The card is so good.
Let's just make a gazillion zombies. Well, 4.
Yeah, so he's making 4 zombies here, or 3 zombies here, because
Dark
he makes
Salvation.
2 with Dark
Oh,
Salvation,
boy.
and then he's able to shrink the Tireless Tracker by 3, and then because the Tireless Tracker dies, he makes another zombie with the Kalitas. So he essentially made 3 zombies that turn and killed a creature, all for 1 card.
Yeah.
That card is absurd. And that card, you can even play it for 1 mana just to kill something. It's just so good at so many different stages of the game.
So now here is Yanni's expertise, which almost wipes the board and just leaves little Kalitas.
And Shaun would have loved that a few turns ago, because if he had had it a few turns ago, he could have played it and then +1'd his Liliana the Last Hope and cleared the whole board.
Yeah, all gone.
But in the current situation, Shaun didn't even have something that cost 3 or less mana to follow up with.
Okay, Shaun McLaren, suddenly you are in trouble. 27 to 15. Don't worry about the 27 particularly, but the 15 is what's relevant right now, and that board state.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's 10 points of power on Ethan's side of the table.
From essentially nowhere, over the course of 2 turns, this game has really transformed.
Yeah, we've seen Shaun's deck be really strong this weekend, but not having access to more copies of Yanni's expertise and drawing that card a few turns too late has really proved to be problematic for him. And I think one of the problems with Shaun's deck in matchups like this, where he has so many cards to sideboard in too, is that he's really trying to put together combinations of creatures that are very powerful.
Yep.
Whiny Constrictor in particular is super, super strong. So once your opponent sideboards in a bunch of removal, creating those combinations of things that, you know, are so powerful, that's really hard to do.
Yep. And yet again, Grasp of Darkness. Just Ethan has had removal for literally everything Shaun's done.
Yeah, and one of those removal spells was Dark Salvation, and that was really the turning point of the game. And even though there was Yanni's expertise to clean up, it didn't really matter, because the Kalitas had, you know, at that point grown so large that it was just able to take over the game by itself.
So it's looking like Shaun McLaren, a Pro Tour champion, of course, is not going to claim his first shot at the top 8, because it's starting to look like Ethan is going to be potentially the very first player into our virtual top 8, if you like, because I can see that Paul Dean's match at table 1 out in front of us is still going on. Tables 1 and 3 are still playing deep in the round. So this would theoretically be our first entrant into the top 8 as Winding Constrictor comes down from McLaren. But Ethan looking to just put a bow on proceedings here, take the match 2-1. And coming up, we have a Time Warp match to savor. Black-red control against blue-red control.
Ooh, I'm excited for that.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of that we're going to get to see, because things are going thick and fast, and obviously we'll get you back to live Magic for round 14. But that'll be fun to take a look at. Let's see how few non-land permanents we can have on the battlefield at any given time.
Now, Shaun's forced to chump block Kalitas here, and chump blocking Kalitas is especially bad, because not only is your opponent gaining life, not only are you getting chipped away by whatever else they're attacking with, but Ethan's also getting a zombie out of the deal.
Okay, here's a fatal push. Kalitas finally dies. Kalitas has been there forever, but that was the last action of the match. Shaun McLaren falls to 0 and falls to 11-2. He'll come back next round, dust himself down, and play again for what we think will be a slot in the top 8 at 12-2 with the chance to ID, or maybe even make it in at 12-3. For Ethan Gaieski, though, he's 12-1, and the most likely scenario is that even with 2 losses, he'd be in. But it turns out that we're still not ready for Time Warp. We've still got live Magic to bring you, which is awesome. And Team of Marvel at 10-2, Patrick Reynolds, is playing a bristling Hydra here, up against Anand Khare from New Jersey, one of Jake's locals, with a Tireless Tracker. We've already got a Never to Return in the graveyard and a Transgress the Mind. You see an Attune with Ether top of your screen from Reynolds. So the winner here gets to 11-2 and will play for top 8 next round. The loser at 10-3 would have to win twice and then, well, just hope that 12-3 may be enough for some people and that they get into that umbrella of some people. But having lost their third round here rather than falling to X3 in the penultimate round or the last round, they are more likely to have less good tie breaks than potential competitors for those top 8 slots. So potentially this is an elimination game right here as Anand adds Grim Flayer to the board. And now it's a pair of bristling Hydra.
Is that the multiple of Hydra?
No, I would imagine it's Hydras. Yeah. But in any case, Reynolds is trying to stay hydrated, which is always good.
It's always a wise decision to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Those cards are great, too, against Anand because all of his removal is spot removal. And, you know, if he tries to use a card like Grasp of Darkness to deal with one of these Bristling Hydras, Patrick's going to be able to just take down his energy and protect those big-ass creatures. Now, Tireless Tracker here, getting a little bit bigger as a clue gets sacrificed by Anand. And Anand seeming to be pretty far ahead on cards. One thing I like about Patrick's deck is the inclusion of these Bristling Hydras. Are we sure that he's a Marvel deck here?
That's what we got.
Yeah, now, the thing is, normally when you see those in these Temur decks, it often means that they're playing some type of Elder Deep Fiend type of strategy also.
We're going to be flying slightly blind here. We have a very interesting deck list in front of us, but neither of them say Patrick or Reynolds.
Yeah.
So,
so I'm wondering if he's actually
in fact is not this.
Yeah, if he's playing the Temur energy deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a really exciting deck. I got a chance to play that on Magic Online this week, and I was able to use Elder Deep Fiend to wipe out a few opponents. The Elder Deep Fiend's especially strong when you're able to chain them together. So you can tap down your opponent's creatures, attack them for a bunch of damage, and then on the next turn do the same thing all over again and win the game quite easily. We see a Chandra Flamecaller here from Patrick Reynolds. And that actually tells me he likely is on a Marvel-type strategy. I mean, such powerful cards on both sides of the table, and both players with a decent number of cards in hand. This game is really close here. Anand able to get another clue there. His Tireless Tracker kind of getting out of hand here. Currently a 7-6 as he draws more and more cards. Now, I believe he has access to a lot of different options this turn. Oh, wow. And it looks like it's Omnixilus Reignited once again coming down. And, you know, this is a card that we didn't see much of in Standard in the past. Like, it's been in some decks, but it's never been too popular. And this weekend, I feel like every time we've seen somebody play an Omnixilus Reignited, they've ended up winning the game. Now, one thing that's troublesome for Omnixilus in this situation is that Bristling Hydra can gain hexproof, so Omnixilus can't just tick down to kill it. But even so, well, it looks like Omnixilus isn't long for this world, with Chandra the Flamecaller able to make those elementals.
So let's see which of these two can tidy things up and get themselves to 11-2. In come the Bristling Hydras.
And suddenly this game went from looking very close to it seeming like Patrick Reynolds is so solidly in the driver's seat that I can't even imagine Anand coming back.
Right, because there goes Omnixilus.
And, you know, there you see the power of Chandra Flamecaller. You know, able to take down there You know, Harness Lightning, getting that tireless tracker out of the way was kind of the death knell.
Yep, the board is overwhelmingly in favor of Patrick Reynolds, so we're going to close this one out any minute, one would think. Just how many hits would it need? We've got 11 energy sitting over there.
Yeah, I don't think he'd want to use his energy aggressively with these Bristling Hydras unless Anand is tapped out. But he may just want to make some Thopters here as Anand tries to use an Omnixilus Reignited to get that Whirler Virtuoso off the table. Yeah, so Anand, you know, trying to keep his head above water here, treading as fast as he can. It's not going to be enough. Temur Marvel, you know, proving itself to be the boogeyman that it actually is. And oof.
Bye.
Yeah, and at this point, that's got to be it.
Yeah, it's like, I'm at
no
19,
choice.
but that's not germane. What is germane is that Patrick Reynolds is advancing to 11-2. Congratulations to him. He will play next round for the top 8. Anand has to keep on trying in the last couple of rounds. All right, we're going to take a very quick break. When Jake and I come back, it'll be control time.